So hi everyone, thank you very much for joining me. This is my very first masterclass with Digital Boost, so I'm really excited to be here. So yeah, as the title says, this is Content Design 101, how to use written content to elevate your website. So here's just a quick agenda of what we'll cover today. I'll go through a quick introduction as to who I am. Then we'll go on to what is content design. I'll share some examples of content design. We'll look at how people read online, and this is very different from how people are reading newspapers. We'll also talk about why content design matters, some tips for why you might want to start thinking about using content design. I'll also share some advice on how you can get started and some tools and resources. And then, as Alice said, we'll have time for a Q&A. So hello again, I'm Freya. I'm a content design specialist at BT Business. I've been at BT since February this year, so I'm still very, very new. I've been working in content design since 2021. Previously, I was a copywriter at a digital brand agency, and I would work with a range of different businesses to help with their websites in terms of their marketing, their blogs, their social media. And I also have a BA in philosophy and an MSc in marketing from Strathclyde Business School. Okay, so you might be wondering, what is content design? If you're new and you're not sure, then hopefully this example or this scenario will help. Okay, so I want you to imagine the following scenario. So you're traveling to Madrid for the first time. You speak English as your first language. You might know some Spanish, but you don't really know that much. You've landed at the airport. You have gone through customs. You've collected your luggage, and you're now looking for an exit. So think about that before I show the next slide. So here you are on your journey, and you find this sign. So you're at the airport, and you can see puertas. You can also see another sign that says puertas and another sign that says salida. So imagine how you might be feeling at this moment in time. If you're not familiar with Spanish, you might be feeling a little bit stressed. You might be feeling a bit lost. You might not know exactly where you're going. You might have to do a bit of guesswork. So it might just be all in all quite an overwhelming experience if you've never been to this airport before, and you might be jet lagged and you don't really know where you're going. Now compare this sign with this second sign. And here we can see above puertas, we have gates. And you'll also see above salida is the word exit. So now think about how you might be feeling in this scenario. You might be feeling much more confident. You know where you're going. You're thinking, right, I recognize that. So you're most likely to follow that sign to the exit, to find the taxi, and you can start your holiday. So two different experiences with a little bit of content there. So the question is, which sign makes the journey more easy, or what makes it feel more seamless? And I'm sure you can all agree that when there's a little bit of English to help with that Spanish, it makes the experience and the journey feel much easier and less stressful to go through. So that's a little bit of what content design can do in terms of helping customers throughout an online journey. So some key takeaways, I would say, of like what content design is. This is my definition. This is how I think about it. I think content design is always trying to understand the whole journey that your customers are going on. So from start to finish. And that journey might not just be on your website, but that also might mean the wider servicescape of where customers, how they come into a journey. It might be a wider than just a website. I think it's also about trying to keep your customers on the right path. So in this sign with this example, information is being shown at a particular moment in that journey. So they're not seeing information that's not relevant to them. They're only seeing information that they need to see at that moment in time to really help them along their way. As I said, this is kind of helping them and giving them information along those key moments in a journey. And I think as a content designer, when you are thinking about content design, it's also thinking about what options you want to show for certain moments of time as well. Sorry, at certain moments in the time, so it's not an overwhelming experience. So you're just giving the information that customers need to know at specific moments. It's also about helping people to achieve a final goal. So in this example, the goal was to leave the airport, sorry. But a final goal on a website might be to make a purchase, let's say. Content should always be accessible and inclusive. That's really, really important. And content design should also be about speaking the same language as your customer as well, so that people can understand exactly what it is that they need to do throughout a particular journey. So I also now just want to share some examples, some online examples of what content design is. So I've just got 3 that I'd like to share. So this one is on the Royal Mail website. I don't know if anybody is familiar with this, but it's a really great tool if you're not sure about a particular address, or you might have some information about an address, but you don't have all of it. And if, let's say, for example, the scenario is you want to send a parcel, you want to have the full address before you put it in the post because you don't want it to get lost. So you can go onto this website and you'll see the header here says find an address. There's also some help text to help you if you're using this for the first time. And there's also some additional help in Welsh, and also further down the page, there's just some additional help. So as a first-time user, this is a really great just example of how this is a small piece of content design, but it's telling you what you need to do to essentially help you with finding an address. A second example is from gov.uk. So if you're not from the UK, we have a lot of bank holidays, which are like our national holidays. And the scenario might be, for example, I need to know, or I don't need to know, but I'd like to know when the next bank holidays are so I can plan some time off work and make sure I know exactly which days are coming up and so on. So you could go onto this website, you go onto the Gov website, and you could find UK bank holidays. The heading here is really clear. You can also tab along through England and Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland to find the specific bank holidays that would apply to you. And then all of the information is ordered in a way that people are expecting to see it. So what's the next bank holiday? You've got the day of the week, and you've also got the name of the bank holiday as well. So again, a really nice piece of content that's very clear, and it's very intentional in terms of how this was designed, and really answering that problem or scenario where somebody doesn't know when a bank holiday is, and this is a nice way of finding exactly what they need to know in a really quick way. The last example here I want to show is another scenario where you're not feeling very well and you want to find out if you have flu, for example. So the NHS, if you're not from the UK, this is our National Health Service. It's a really great website if you're not feeling very well, and you can go on from a list of A to Z, and you can look at what you might be feeling. You might be feeling not very well, and this is a great tool. So I've just chosen an example here of I have flu and I'm not sure if I've got flu. So I would go on this A to Z, I would look for F and find flu. And what's really nice about this is the headings are really clear. So the flu is the same word that we're using. Everybody's, most people are familiar with that word. And the heading is check if you have flu. And you have a bulleted list here of words and language that's very easy, or not easy, but it's very familiar. These are the sorts of, this isn't medical terminology, from a doctor. This is how people speak. And so people can recognize really clearly if they have one of those symptoms, let's say. The second screenshot here is how to treat flu. So this is obviously, I couldn't share the whole page, but it's basically one long page. So if you were to go through it, you would find the next heading along, which is how to treat it. So again, this is really nice and clear of like what to do, a bulleted list, rest, sleep, keep warm. And then further down the page, this is if it's much more serious, this is what to do. And then this information is a little bit more highlighted on the page. And also the call to action. So the CTAs are really clear as well. So this is what to do if it's very serious. And again, you know where to find help. So those were just some examples of what content design can look like. And in terms of a summary, I would say that in all of these examples, what I've tried to do is share the scenario or the problem or the need that somebody has. And so content design is really answering those. Typically, it's based on evidence or on research of real life scenarios, and though these are answers to them, I think it's really important to use simple and concise language in a way that everybody can understand it. you'll notice that in the health example, the NHS example, tone of voice is really important as well. So considering how people are feeling throughout a journey or in a moment in time, they might be feeling stressed, they might be feeling worried. And again, the tone of voice and how you express instructions is really important so that people don't feel overwhelmed. Another example of the content here is that it's chunked. So this means that rather than have lots and lots of content and it's not broken up, this is a really deliberate decision to make it more easy to digest and consume when you have it in bullet lists, for example. And also everything on the page is serving a purpose, which is really important. So nothing is extra, everything is working really nicely to answer that scenario. And lastly, help is really clearly signposted, which is quite important as well, because you want to guide people along that path, but also if they need that help and they need to reach out to somebody, that's also available as well. So I also think it's really important to think about how people read online. So reading online is very different from reading a book or reading a newspaper. I think typically people are just they're more likely to skim, read, and scan content on a website. And the Nielsen Norman Group did some really interesting research. They first conducted some research in 2006, and what they did was they looked at they had eye tracking technology. So they would give participants a screen, and they would say, read this website. And what they would do is they would track where their eyes would move along the page. And what they discovered was typically people who are reading in English, they will read content with an F shape in mind. So they'll read all the way across the top of that F, they'll go to the second, they'll read along, and then they'll move from the column, and they'll just sort of scan maybe the first one or two words, but they won't sort of finish all of that information. And I think this is really important because I think it also is important to think, okay, this is one type of reading pattern. There are lots of different types of reading patterns, but generally this is how people will read. And it's really important to think about this when you are thinking about your own content and how you're writing content. Even though technology has changed and times have moved on since 2006, but generally it's really important to think about putting the most important information perhaps at the top of the page, or like a keyword at the start of a sentence, so that for those people who are reading, they're not going to miss anything. So that's also something to sort of keep in mind when you're sort of thinking about content. So you might be wondering, why does content design matter? And I really wanted to share a quote that I found a while ago on LinkedIn when I was preparing for this talk, and I think it sums it up really nicely. So I'll read out the quote. This is from Dan Murray, who says, "Your only salesperson that works 24/7 is your website. That's why great copy and content matters." And what I really like about this is it kind of shows how much work the content on your website is doing. Maybe you're a small business and you're one person. Maybe there's two or three people in your team. There's only so much that you can do in a working day. And if you have really great content on your website, you can help people at all times. Maybe they have an inquiry and it's out of business hours. But I think it just really shows just how much a website can really help you and your business if you do the content really well. So now I want to show you some business examples of content design in a slightly different way than the previous examples. And I should say that I don't have any affiliation with these businesses, but I just really like their content and what they're doing. And I wanted to share some examples of things which maybe might apply to your business or might give you a little bit of inspiration as to how content design might work in a business capacity. So the first one here is, this is a restaurant. It's called Soul Vegan, a really great restaurant in Edinburgh if you are there. And one thing I really like about this website is this is their homepage. This is their landing page. It's also at the top of the fold. So if you're not familiar with that term, the top of the fold means that that's the top part of a website before you scroll. So this is when you go into the landing page, this is the first information that you see. And what I really like about this is immediately you can see some images of the food. Perfect place for vegan souls. What I really like about this landing page is book a table and view our menu are really, really clear. And I think what they've probably been thinking about is when customers are searching for a restaurant, they're most likely to be thinking, what can I eat here? What does the food look like? you might have an allergy, will I be able to find something that I like? And also the book a table is really, really front and center. It's really prominent in terms of a call to action. And I've just got a screenshot here of what the book a table looks like. I think this may be a third party, but it's just really, really clear in terms of, it's a really simple to use, and for a first-time user, this is kind of all the information that you need. And again, it's really, really quick to find all of this information. I just thought that was a really, really nice example of the content design, which is working really well here. Second example is from Everpress. I'm not sure if people are familiar with this, but this is a t-shirt company that allows creators to create their designs on t-shirts, a little bit like Etsy, but my understanding for Everpress, it's a little bit more sustainable. So if you place an order, you're not likely to receive it in 3 days. They tend to I think how it works is they will need a minimum number of orders before they can ship all those items. And I suppose with this particular business model, there's a lot of education that needs to happen. So people might not be familiar with how this system works and how they can shop there. And one thing I liked about how Everpress have done their customer services is they have a how it works section, but they also have if you want to contact them. And what's really nice here is that they haven't just put their they put an address and a number, but what they've done is they've added a little bit of friction here. And by that, I mean, they've got some like FAQs just before their inquiries. So they've obviously understood that people are maybe asking the same sorts of questions. So rather than say, here's our email address, they've actually sort of thought, okay, these are people are most likely to ask these questions. So why don't we create some content that answers those questions? And on the second slide here, what I have is this is an example. So if you were to click on one of those questions, somebody has asked, I've placed an order, what next? And again, because it works in a slightly different way, people might not be sure, might not know exactly how it works. And again, this is just a way of giving people their content before asking or before reaching out to the service team. So again, just a really nice example of something that you might want to consider for your own website. If you do have a lot of FAQs, it might just be nice to put it just before that contact information. And the last one here I have to share is around Patch. So if you're not familiar with Patch, this is an online store where you can buy plants. And what I love about this website is it's very beautiful in terms of design. I highly recommend having a look at it, even if you're not interested in plants. Like, it's just a really, really nicely designed website. And this is the landing page here, so plants made easy. And one thing I like about it is I think they've understood that with plants, for example, they are quite difficult to look after, and people love the idea of plants, but maybe they struggle to look after them. And I think what they've done is they've obviously it's a plant store, but also there's a real emphasis on care and looking after your plants. So it's really for people who want to get into plants and maybe they just don't know anything about it. And if you can see from the navigation, the first thing on the navigation bar is plants, pots, new in, plant care. But obviously they've put the plants they've ordered this information very deliberately so that plants is the first thing that people are clicking on. So again, just making that really easy, and then dividing it out by indoor, outdoor plants in a way that people are, maybe they're looking for that. I've also included on the top right here, just how the navigation looks like. So if somebody's going through, they can always find out what it is that they're looking for, which I think is really nice, so that somebody's never getting lost. So they can go by indoor plants, outdoor plants, plant type, height, room, and so on. So again, it's just making the navigation really, really nice and easy to follow. Another thing that I really like about Patch is around the language that they use. And so this is a filters section. So on the left-hand side here, we have different ways of filtering the plants. And if you're new to plants, you might not know very much about the plants, but you're obviously thinking about, okay, I have a particular space that maybe I want to fill with plants. And what you can do is you can start filtering this information by the light, the care level, the room. And I also think it's really nice that they've included some information, or a filter rather, for if you have children or if you have pets, because that's another thing that's really important when you're thinking about plants. That's another filter to categorize so that you can find exactly what you're looking for. And if you were to click on to one of these particular products, it also gives you even more information about how to care for your plants. So again, it's a really nice example of they've recognized that people love plants and they really want to buy them and get into plants, but they're just not sure how to look after them. And again, it's just nice to sort of to look at how they address that scenario with content here. So to sum up some benefits of content design, I would say with all of these examples, it shows that you can really save time for you and for your customers. Going back to that original quote about the content working for you. So thinking about inquiries, for example, if you're able to add some FAQs, that can really save you some time and also your customers because they can find the content quite easily. Again, that kind of relates to self-service. So self-service means that you're not having to reach out to anybody because you get stuck. That information is there, and the content is working for what you need it to do. In terms of navigation, I think a website that is optimizing their content, it makes it really easy to find things on your website as well. So with the example of Patch, it's a really nice way of just navigating through with the right kind of labels and the right kind of language that people are looking for, and they know where to find things. I've already talked about reducing the number of inquiries. That will obviously help as well in terms of saving time. I've also added here that it creates a bit of a halo effect for your brand. So I think this is a term from psychology. I've also heard it from my marketing background as well. And with a halo effect, it's the idea that you're kind of creating an impression of your brand or your service, your product, before somebody has even stepped foot in your store. So if you're able to create a nice website with great content, that's also adding to that halo effect so that people know what to expect before they buy a product from you. And again, that can just really help with your sort of branding and your marketing as well. Again, I would say it gives you a bit of a competitive advantage. I think, depending on, I suppose, as you all know, if you have your own brand, your own company, you want to keep an eye out what competitors are doing. But again, if you're able to do content really well, that does give you an advantage, I would say. And customer loyalty, I think if your website or your app is easy to use and people can find what they're looking for really quickly, I think you'll find that people are more likely to come back and use it again if it's an easy website to use. Okay, so how can you start applying content design? Well, I would say it doesn't start with writing. I think there's a lot of things that go before you start writing your content. And I would say research is a really great place to start. This is what we would do in user experience design is we always start with research. And you always want to think about, use what you have already. So if you do have a website and you have that analytics set up, I think that would be a really great place to start, to think about your trends, just look for patterns, what people are doing, where people are entering your site, how long they're staying on the site for, where people might be getting stuck in a journey. Again, just have a look at that as a starting point. If you can, speak to your customers. I don't know if it's possible, but you might want to, after each time, if you say you have an online store, you might want to think about if somebody's purchased something from you, you might want to add something about research afterwards, invite people to give their feedback on something. You might want to offer an incentive, but speaking to your customers is a really great way to figuring out what problems they're having, the scenarios, what they're looking for on a website, and so on. Inquiry data, so for example, you might want to start thinking about all the inquiries that you're getting over a period of time, what you're answering on a regular basis. Is there any way that you can start pulling out some trends and some themes and maybe start grouping those together? That will also be really helpful in terms of where you want to prioritize. Again, that's sort of similar about what customers are asking you for. Online reviews, that again, just a great way of just researching what people are saying about your company online. That goes to social media as well, forums, review sites. Again, this is all really just good insight in terms of ways that you might be able to improve with content depending on what people are saying. Secondly, I would say think about your priority areas. I think content design is a lot of work, and if you have limited time, limited resources, you really want to think about your priority areas. So I would suggest thinking about what's important for your customers, but also what's important for your business. And say, for example, you want to grow in a particular area. You also want to see if there's some overlap and thinking about, okay, what do you really want to focus on? What's good for you? What's good for your customers? And start there in terms of your priority areas. And yeah, also think about what do your customers need to do on your website as well. So thinking about what's really, really important for them in terms of a top task. So I've mentioned this term top task. So top task really refers to, say, for example, your customers are on your website. There might be lots of different things that they're wanting to do. They might want to purchase something. They might want to check contact information. They might want to check delivery dates and so on. Excuse me, and all of these are types of top tasks. So just thinking about what are the most important things that customers are doing, and that will also help you with your priority areas as well. Thirdly, I would say focus on the journeys that, like the priority journeys, I guess. So you might have your priority areas, but then think about what type of journey you really want to focus on, and break that journey down into sections really. So thinking about the airport experience, that's a long journey from booking a flight to going on holiday. But if you can start breaking down that journey little by little, that also might help make it more manageable when you start thinking about your content and start thinking about those priority areas. I would also suggest, if you do have a journey that you want to focus on, try going on that journey as if you were a first-time user and you've never been to the website before, and just looking at it through a different lens. You might want to start thinking about taking some screenshots and just document that journey of what it looks like. So it might even start from a search site, it might start from social media, but if you're starting from the landing page of your website, you might want to start from there and thinking about counting the clicks. Is it clear what's working well, what's not working well? How might customers, go through this experience, and what it's like for them? And that's another way of just identifying areas that you might want to improve with some content. And maybe if you do it this way, you might recognize some areas where you do want to improve. So moving on to planning your content, once you've done all of that research and you've gathered all of these insights, that will probably be a lot of information, but I think it's really important to go back to the scenario. So as I mentioned, all of these examples, you have a scenario in mind of what that customer wants to achieve on your website, and how might the content answer that scenario in a way. So I would just go back and think, before you start writing, thinking about what is the problem that you're trying to solve. Do you have all of that information? Is there anything that you're lacking that you need to go and research? So for example, you might not be familiar with all of the ins and outs of customer service in terms of like deliveries and whatever information it is. Is there another colleague that you need to get some more information from? And that's just, again, just building up all of your knowledge before you start actually writing. So yeah, some tips for writing. I think, again, with the first example, I think it's really important to think about the language that your customers are using. How do they speak? What's familiar to them? And yeah, that's just a really important one. I would recommend avoiding jargon and terminology if you can. It's not the clearest, and I think it's really important to explain it at least the first time that you're using it, and explain any acronyms, so that anybody who is using your website for the first time or isn't familiar with that jargon or terminology, they can understand it really well. Third example here is using active and passive voice. So I know that's a bit of a technical term, but I've just included an example. So an example of using the passive voice would be, your confirmation email will be sent to you. So that would be an example of passive voice. And passive voice it's quite difficult to read. So I would always suggest, if you do find something like this, to then change it around into active voice. So another example of active voice would be, we'll send you a confirmation email. It just makes it really easier. It makes it much easier to read when it's in the active voice. And I'll share a tool that will allow you to identify these if you're not sure which one is which. I also think it's really important to structure your content with headings. So whatever CMS and content management system you're using, you can generally structure your headings by size. And this is really important for screen readers, for example. So if somebody is using a screen reader, they'll be able to scroll through the content in the right order. So you want to have H1, H2, H3. Again, just a really good way of structuring your content. Bullet lists, I think, as you've seen from the health example, it's really important, if you do have a lot of information, rather than having it all in one list along one line, which makes it very difficult, you want to have a bulleted list wherever possible, so that when people are scanning for that information, they can find it really quickly. Check the reading level of your content as well. That's another one that makes it really accessible. Again, I'll share a tool that will allow you to do that. And I would also say lead with verbs when you are directing people to things that they need to do on the website. So for example, book a table, view our menu. Again, that will also just really help when people are scanning for their content around the website. So I've got a couple of tools, resources to help. So this one is one of my favorites. This is a website called Hemingway. It's free to use. I've put the website here so you can find it. And what's really nice about Hemingway is you can copy and paste your content. I've just copied and pasted some content here. You can use this website to review your content. And on the right-hand side, it will give you a readability score. Ideally, you want your readability score to be good. That makes that it's that more people can access your content. And what's really nice is if you put some content in, it will also tell you where the where the passive voice is used, and it will highlight a section. So then you can go back and you can review that content, you can rewrite it, and then it will just allow you, again, just gives you really good feedback in terms of making sure your content is as good as it can be. Another example I've got here is, this is from Monzo. I think for those who follow Monzo on LinkedIn, they just have a great tone of voice. They're really, really nice. They just have a way with words, and they actually have their tone of voice guidelines on their website. And what I really like about this example here is they have ways that of swapping out sort of more formal professional words with words which are just as good, but they're easier to understand. So for example, require, you might want to think about need. And what I think what's really nice about this is it's not making the language or the tone less formal by using a different word. You don't need to use kind of elevated formal language to make it feel more professional. I think using these sorts of words that are easier to understand is just as good, and if not better, for your audience. So again, just another resource to have a look at of how they create a tone of voice guidelines. And maybe if you don't have a tone of voice guidelines, this is just a nice example of making sure that your written content across all of your different channels and platforms is consistent. If you've got lots of different writers, tone of voice guidelines is just a really nice tool to use. I've also included all of these websites as well. So if you are interested in the Nielsen-Norman research, there are lots of different articles around that. Nielsen-Norman, if you're interested in UX or user experience design in general, is a really great website just for research in general. And these are the links to find out more about that, how people read online research. So in summary, I would say for content design and using content design, I would say always start with those scenarios, always think about imagining yourself as that customer and where they are in a journey, what they need to do and how can they do that. And thinking about how you can help your customers along the way, trying to make it as easy for them as you can with clear headings, signposts and call to actions. And last but not least, write like your customers speak. So you can help as many customers along their way and helping them do what they need to do on your website. And that is everything from me. So thank you very much. Hope I'm okay for time, and we can hopefully have some time for questions.